Racism is woven into every infrastructure in our society that we can think of. It's a part of social systems, economic systems, educational systems, and our political structures. Structural racism keeps white people in power. As social workers, we are called to challenge this social hierarchy. Given that social workers' primary mission is to enhance human well-being and to meet the basic needs of all people who experience vulnerabilities, oppression, or poverty, social workers should be leading efforts to change the racist structure of society. Many of us are feeling an urgency to act on the momentum created by the Black Lives Matter protests. We want to remind you of some of the actions to promote justice that we discussed in Social Work 538. And we've grouped these strategies into 3 categories: raising awareness, paying it forward, your professional political power for change. There are a number of ways we can raise awareness of structural racism. The first is to join a protest or to rally. The power of the protest is that it brings issues to the minds and hearts of the wider community. We are seeing that the Black Lives Matter protests are lasting several days around the country and throughout the world as a powerful way of bringing awareness to racial injustice. Another option is to use social media as a platform to share, educate, and have productive conversations. This is a way of raising awareness of the social work perspective of structural inequity. And finally, write to your local newspaper, write on a blog, or use another outlet that publishes editorials and letters to the editor. You can voice your perspective in a letter or brief editorial. You would be surprised at how many newspapers are open to publishing community voices. This can be a chance to raise the social work perspective within your own community. Another strategy for creating structural change is what we call pay it forward. By this we mean contributing time or money to the cause. One option is to raise funds for organizations that are already doing the work of fighting structural inequity. We have provided a list of many of these organizations in the resource file. These include the national organizations like the NAACP or ACLU, and also local organizations. For example, in Nashville, local organizations doing this work include the Equity Alliance and Gideon's Army. You can also support your local Black Lives Matter chapters. A second option is to support small businesses that are owned by people of color. While many businesses in the US have found financial hardship related to COVID-19, it's been particularly strong hardship among African American communities. Prior to this pandemic, small businesses owned by people of color often faced additional challenges such as difficulty accessing business loans, and they also tend to have higher interest rates on business loans that are obtained. Supporting a Black-owned business is a way of showing your support of Black people holding power as community stakeholders and community business owners. And then finally, volunteering is a great strategy. Money is tight for a lot of us right now, and we may not be able to give financially. Remember that giving the gift of your time is a powerful and meaningful way to create change. There are infinite ways to volunteer our time. We can offer direct service, we can help with fundraising, we can make phone calls, or we can be of service to any organization that is fighting towards this cause. The final strategy we want to focus on is in the realm of political social work. Whether you're a clinical social worker or a community social worker, there are meaningful ways to be involved in work that seeks to overcome systemic barriers to racial equity. We need to remember that policy is a key means of oppression and control. Policies structure our social, economic, educational, and political systems. To create structural change, we need policies that strive for equity and leaders who are willing to uphold those policies. Voting is power for racial justice and structural change. And there are 3 ways you can get involved with political social work. One option for action is to get involved with advocacy groups. The NASW is one example of an advocacy group that lobbies our political system for change. National groups such as the ACLU and NAACP, as well as local groups in our communities, do this also. Advocacy groups often offer opportunities for us to sign petitions, raise money, or contact our legislators in large numbers. We can engage in this kind of action in a way that's specific to the problems in our own community. The next type of action we can take is to get involved in politics at local, state, and/or federal levels. Increasingly, social workers are running for political office and being elected into office. Getting involved in local politics is often a great place to start. We can run to be on our local school boards, we can join the PTA, we can even be a part of diversity, equity, and inclusion groups in our towns or communities as a way of working to create change. If running for office isn't your jam, you can also do things like testify at town hall meetings, where you're simply sharing your perspective in a platform where it can matter. And finally, we can get involved with voting. It's important to have the voices of the Black community members heard in elections. Otherwise, their perspective is not represented in the election of legislative officials. The NASW has partnered with Voting is Social Work to support voter registration and access to voting as key priorities of the social work profession this year. We want to remind you to get out there and vote in your local elections, your state elections, in primaries, and in the 2020 federal election. This is an opportunity to elect legislators who will help to pass and enforce policies that create equity. The other way to help with voting is to help people register to vote. Communities of color are often suppressed at the ballot box, meaning they have less access to voting rights and less access to registering to vote. Voting is power for racial justice. We can be a part of registering our clients to vote, our friends and family members to vote, and by joining community initiatives that register voters.